Here we go.
Hello and welcome to Community Thinkers, a broadcast series from the Summit Hill Association. Thanks for joining us. In this series, we hear from one of St. Paul's most thoughtful people about issues that matter to our neighbors here in Summit Hill and St. Paul as a whole. I'm Sherry Johnson. I'm a process guide, inclusion trainer, and complexity coach. I'm also a board member here at the Summit Hill Association.
And I'm Monica Haas. I'm the executive director of the Summit Hill Association, and I am your go-to gal for all things Summit Hill. So what is Community Thinkers? We started this series to engage our community as we renew our neighborhood comprehensive plan. We're finding out that the more we learn about planning, sustainability, racial equity, and economic development, we realize there's so much more we have to learn.
Yeah, and this show is for you. So after I get things started with our guests, we'll turn to the chat where Monica will share your questions with our guest. And before we learn from today's community thinker, though, we invite you to comment and ask questions in the thread below. What brought you here today? We would love to know. So the community thinker we've asked to join us today is Christina Nicholson, program manager of the Worker Owner Initiative at NEXUS Community Partners. We'll talk today about the rise of business cooperative model and consider how it might impact economic development in commercial areas like Grand Avenue. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, you and I have had some good conversations leading up to this. We'd love our guests to know you too. Tell us about your personal history with Summit Hill and Grand Avenue or neighborhoods like it.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I know Summit Hill well. I know Grand Avenue. I worked at Mississippi Market as their operations manager and their owner representative for 8 years. And so really familiar with the neighborhood, worked on Selby Avenue. So I know Summit, I know Rondo, I know all the communities surrounding that area. And for me, Grand Avenue was always like the place to go to when I needed a break. So I would go to Cooks of Crocus Hill. I would go to Brasa and get some food. I would walk down and go to the Aveda spot and get some nice product. So Grand was always like, my grounding space. So I've loved it over the years, did a lot of my Christmas shopping there. And really excited to have this conversation, still working in St. Paul, in the worker owner space, as you mentioned. So I'm excited to talk about how these worlds connect.
Yeah, no kidding. So yes, you're here to talk about business cooperatives. For those who are not familiar with them, what are they?
Sure. So the work that I do, I think a lot of people, or at least some, are familiar with Mississippi Market, and that is a cooperative model. It's a member cooperative where you don't have to be a member to shop, but if you are a member, you get patronage. So the more you use Mississippi Market as a member, the more money you get back at the end of the year. So it's a financial model that gives money back to the community as opposed to shareholders. So the work I'm doing now in worker ownership is a similar model, but it is the workers of a company that owns the business. So it creates a circular relationship where the shareholders are the employees, are the owners of the business. So it creates a very stable, localized model for growing businesses and helping folks think of themselves not only as employees, but as entrepreneurs and business owners.
What role then might cooperatives play in strengthening our small business sector, especially for retail and restaurants, which we hear are in a lot of trouble these days?
Oh my God, there's so many ways. And that's why I am really excited to work at NEXUS. So just a brief moment for my background. I have worked in cooperatives for over 25 years now. I got my master's in business administration at Hamlin. So when I say I know St. Paul, I know all of St. Paul. And I just finished my MBA up 2 years ago, and I was looking at that intersection between business and cooperatives and how they could grow together. So the worker owner model is one of those models that is also starting to grow in terms of the national ecosystem. So I think a lot of us have heard about the federal money coming to the states to support small businesses, and that is really an entry place for worker ownership. In the United States and in Minnesota as well, there are a number of folks who are looking to retire and thinking about next steps of their business. So a lot of where worker ownership can play a role is in succession planning. Very few owners actually successfully sell their business. on the open market. And what worker ownership does is it provides a willing group of folks to buy the business who actually know how to run the business. And we can talk a little bit today about the structure, but it really is about supporting your employees and supporting the neighborhoods that everybody lives and works in.
Neat. Typically, when employees, this kind of a follow-up, but when employees do buy a business, do they typically keep all the branding and all the aspects, or do they kind of rebirth it typically?
Oh, wow, that's an interesting question. And the answer is yes. So, so what's interesting is a couple of myths that we'll bust at the beginning, because I think that'll help deepen the conversation. One is worker ownership does not mean that the employees have to open up their wallets and pony up all the money to buy the business. We do work with CDFIs, so commercial lenders that loan money to the cooperative to help buy the business. So the employees have to pay the loan back that they took out to buy the business, but it isn't a personal loan. It is a loan that the business took out. Oftentimes what we see, we do like a 3-year conversion process. We help convert the first year, and then we have 2 years of what's called Thrive. And in that Thrive program, we're teaching the workers how to be the business owners. And sometimes they do want to pivot and do a new marketing or a new branding strategy. Sometimes what they love is that this business has a lot of history, either in St. Paul or their community they're in. And so they see themselves as being part of that legacy. So it really depends on the business.
That's cool. Can you name drop a few businesses?
Sure. So we just did a conversion in Minneapolis with an organization called Happy Earth Cleaning Company. And Happy Earth is adorable. They're in their Thrive program now. They fully converted in 2020. And now I'm working with all these 20 somethings and teaching them open book management and talking with them about balance sheets. And it's like the little co-op geek in me is just over the top excited, right? And so, yeah, it's like there is no relationship between understanding a profit and loss statement and how many piercings you have. Those are totally unrelated things. And so it's really fun to see the lights go on and that sense of like ownership and how individual works impact what they're doing. We also have 2 businesses that are in the conversion process here in St. Paul. I can't talk about them because they haven't converted yet, but we're in process. And we're also working with another organization called People's Canvas. And they are in the process of looking at doing the conversion this year. And they're a canvassing organization that does door knocking for various programs. So we have a lot of different kinds of models. We have restaurants, we have canvassing organizations, cleaning organizations, tech organizations. So really this worker cooperative model works in a lot of different spaces.
Cool. So one of the most exciting aspects of NEXUS work is resourcing BIPOC entrepreneurs. But the popular mindset is around the solopreneur. When we think of a BIPOC entrepreneur, how do cooperatives counter that notion, particularly with BIPOC entrepreneurs?
Sure. So another organization we've been working with is called Black Table Arts. Again, they're down here in South Minneapolis on Minnehaha. But I wanted to come today because I have deep St. Paul love. So I want to make sure that you all know this isn't just a Minneapolis thing, and co-ops will cross the river. So just know that that will happen. So Black Table Arts was funded by a nonprofit, but Black Table Arts itself is operating as a cooperative. And they have 3 founders, all BIPOC. And so these 3 founders are creating space for Black artists to be able to create their art, market their art, and build out the BIPOC arts community here in the Twin Cities. So one of the reasons that I think a lot of people think of solopreneurs being in this cooperative space is, quite frankly, these are folks that have not had the same kind of support around organizing. They haven't had the same support around funding as businesses. Historically, they haven't been business owners. And so part of our work is really looking at how are we getting capital into Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities to help them build out their own ideas within their own communities and really lead what will be the next generation of business owners.
Wow, cool. So as we work on our neighborhood plan, how should we be thinking as Summit Hill Association about enabling possibilities like cooperatives?
Sure. I think there's a couple of opportunities. One is right now we are partnering with both City of Minneapolis and Hennepin County. We do have ongoing conversations with St. Paul, and I think there's a real opportunity for us to deepen our relationship with the government of St. Paul, both in the city and the community level. One of the things I love about St. Paul is how active the communities are. And so that community activism, I think, can translate into curiosity, education, and strategizing around what businesses does the community want to maintain, talking to those business owners, finding out what their long-term strategy is, and then understanding early how we might be looking at conversion strategies for owners who hung on through the pandemic, maybe have 1 or 2 more years in them, but really need to start thinking about what that next iteration is going to look like. So for us, what I love is this is me going out to communities, meeting with business owners, meeting with community members, and just saying, hey, tell me what's going on. Because it really is that grassroots, like on the ground. Here's an attorney I know. Here's a CPA I know. Here's a CDFI I know. Let's see what we can get going. And then with this federal money coming in, how might we be able to create opportunities to leverage those funds? Because it isn't that the money won't be there. State of Minnesota is getting like $175 million. It's not that the money's not there. It's that there hasn't been a pipeline to use that capital and actually get it operating in community. So that's some of the work we do, is just really creating those links to make sure that that money is coming into community and helping people thrive where they are.
Awesome. So I was on the Grand Avenue Task Force, and that was one of the things that we really heard a lot about is this fear in the community. We're going to be losing some of these businesses that have been here for a long time.
Yep.
Some of those businesses, of course, during the pandemic especially, got a lot of debt, right? Maybe this is too nerdy a question, but how do cooperative models and maybe some of this federal money address that debt issue, that debt burden?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can talk about debt capacity all ding, ding, ding. So totally safe space for me. I think there's a number of ways. I think one of the ways that people are looking at it is, can that debt be refinanced with a lower interest rate, either through a CDFI, or are there going to be some loan funds, some regenerative Main Street loan funds that are going to be made available through the state economic board that we can then tap into, renegotiate that debt for a lower rate, but also work in partnership to figure out, okay, here's the debt capacity. What are your projections for the next 3 years? I mean, a lot of this is like, let's revision your business plan. What did you learn during this time? How many employees did you want to bring back? What is the opportunity for those employees to basically buy the business, and what might that look like? So I think one of the things I've been a general manager, I've run organizations before. One of the things that I think happens is that the owner has perceived freedom by staff and a huge burden by anyone that knows business. And so it's really like, how do you share that burden? How do you share that weight? And really think about that as an opportunity to empower and get away from this, like, I didn't do it right, or shame, or whatever angst they have around the debt. Let's get some sunshine in it and start dreaming something else. And I really think that that's the moment we're in.
Yeah, and I think that's so hard for a lot of us who are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, because we kind of have that personality of taking the world on. This is a way to release it a little bit.
It really is. And I've worked in organizations, like I led an organization that they were so broke when I came in that we were checking the balance in the checking account every day to make sure we were going to hit payroll. I mean, capital B broke. And it really is that energy of, instead of kind of personalizing it, really just getting curious and talking to other people. And that's why I think cooperatives are so great, because you're never doing it alone. Sometimes you wish you were. I'm not going to lie. That process can be arduous. But it's that idea, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And really, we're in this moment where I think businesses are starting to think about what it means to go far. because going fast keeps us in this debt peak valley cycle that is really exhausting. And quite frankly, I don't think it's sustainable.
And then you don't get the diversity of distributed knowledge of getting a lot of perspectives, right? But yes, it's certainly slower.
Yep.
And then one of the questions we ask every guest is, if you could snap your fingers and have your wish be granted, what do you wish everyone understood about cooperatives?
That a cooperative is not a bunch of people standing in a circle playing hacky sack. Like, I promise that is not cooperatives. The other thing that I don't think folks understand is that many worker-owner cooperatives still have a traditional managerial structure. So the way that they're built is that the employees who own the business are on the board, but the board is overseeing a general manager or president or a director of the organization that is responsible for operations. So it is still a business. It still has an internal management structure. People are still accountable for how they produce or the work that they do. All that this does is it creates an opportunity for people to have a sense of what it means to own their labor. And statistically, not only do people make more money in co-ops than they do in conventional businesses, they are up to 12% more productive, right? And they have almost a 52% higher rate of retention. So these are jobs that stabilize. These are jobs that increase people's overall economic interest. And they're jobs that people have ownership in. You are your boss. So when your boss says get to work on time, you're your boss. So get there, right? So it really does create an opportunity for people to see the whole process, and can be really, really empowering. The downside is there's way more process. This is not, this is not an organization that will be run by decree. It is an organization that will be run by degrees. But the quality of the work, the way the decisions are made, the impact the decisions have, the consistency with which those decisions are carried out throughout the organization is much, much, much more obvious and impactful and positive.
Awesome. And I have so many more questions I could ask you, but I just want to make sure to check in with our guests. If you're watching with us today and you have a question, now is the time to put it in the chat. We'd love to take your questions. Monica's ready to send those to us. But I'm going to keep asking questions because I'm still curious.
I love it. Great.
I think I've been wondering about whether these structures tend to be flatter. And basically, do people share power a little bit more than in a typical business environment? You said that there's usually a general manager still. How does that? Can you? And I'm a structure nerd. Can you talk a little bit more about that dynamic?
Sure. Hey, I find worker owner cooperatives to be both a little flatter and a little more circular. So it's almost like an oval. So think of it as an egg. So the way that it comes up is that, let's say there's a conflict in the organization, because that's what everybody wants to jump to. So we'll just unpack it. If there's a conflict in the organization, say everyone's being required to work 40 hours a week, and before they were only being asked to work 35. So that's an extra 5 hours a week. What does that mean? The way the conversation emerges is, here's how it's going to impact the bottom line. This is how this decision was reached. These were the talking points. What do you all think? And so there's a feedback loop. Once the decision is finally made, if you don't like the decision-making process, that's fine. You can run for the board. And so the next year, you have an opportunity to try and run it differently or better. The kick is that a lot of times people are willing to Monday morning quarterback and talk about what they did or didn't like. It's very different when then someone says, okay, then help us make a better decision. So the way that responsibility is assigned and the way that responsibility is taken up sort of debunks some of the energy that goes into naysaying. And no organization is perfect. It is a lot healthier, and there are way more opportunities and pathways to actually influencing the outcome as opposed to a traditional hierarchical organization. So yes, flatter, but more accountability, and still more how would I say it? Still more organizational clarity about how things are decided and then the responsibility to carry them out.
Gotcha. Thank you. My nerd is complete. My nerdiness is complete. Monica, looks like you've got some questions in the chat if you want to come back and join us.
Great.
Oh, you're on mute. Even on my shows, you can be on mute.
So Brian asked, I missed the beginning of the conversation. Can you give me some local examples of these organizations?
Sure. So a couple, Hub Bike Co-op is a worker-owner cooperative. I didn't give a shout out to the Hub earlier. Happy Earth Cleaning is also a worker-owner cooperative here in the Twin Cities. Black Table Arts is a cooperative that is partially owned by a nonprofit here in the Twin Cities. And we're working on 2 different conversions in St. Paul, so Ryan's going to have to stay tuned.
Awesome. Very curious too, like, it sounds like restaurants around the United States are, especially with, again, that succession planning thing, are looking at cooperative models. In your experience and your understanding, how are restaurants a little bit different? I know that that's a really hot topic for us right now.
Yeah, hot, no pun intended, I'm sure. So there are worker cooperative restaurants. There's a Slice of New York on the West Coast. There are 3 hubs of cooperative restaurants and businesses. There's a hub in Denver. There's another hub in Baltimore. And there are some worker owner restaurants in New York as well. And I have to say this, like, as the no coast leader here in the Midwest, giving Chicago a little bit of side eye, maybe. I think that there's really a lot of opportunity there. The restaurant industry is unique in that it's a high turnover industry, frequently undercapitalized. Bless their hearts, most people who run restaurants do it because they love food, not because they love spreadsheets. And so there is some tension in the model itself. That being said, I think when you look at some of the dynamic stuff that's happening in St. Paul, there are really a lot of opportunities for folks to revision the restaurant industry and make it a career and not just a job. So we're talking about healthcare benefits. We're talking about a consistent schedule. And I think those lifestyle pieces are some of what restaurateurs are starting to understand have to be in play for people to come back to work. And the worker owner model, I think, is one of those places that can sustain that model and help people revision what it means to work in service industry.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, that kind of gets at some of that attraction and retention of a good worker base, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Another thing we're hearing a lot about. Looks like we have some more questions. Monica,
Great.
what else do you have?
Simon would like to know, what challenges exist for cooperatives versus more traditionally structured organizations? For example, access to conventional financing / investment opportunities, employment laws that aren't set up to accommodate the structure.
Yeah, those are great questions. So one of the challenges, and I was actually on a worker to owner call. There's a national worker to owners organization that I was on a call with earlier this week. Both at the federal and the state level, one of the big obstacles is that conventional banks still want to have a personal guarantee for loans. And so cooperatives aren't owned by an individual, they're owned by a cooperative, which is why you see a lot more CDFIs, community development funds, entering the space and doing loans. Sometimes those loans are subordinate, sometimes they're primary, but that's why you see CDFIs and some philanthropy in this space providing capital for these businesses. So that's one obstacle. The other obstacle is if it's a business that's kicking off cash, so it's a business that's cash flowing just fine, one of the ways that we manage that is we look at doing an owner finance buyout. So we'll stage it so that the owner is getting paid back over 3 to 5 years, as opposed to going out and getting a conventional loan. So let's say the owner's like, yep, I don't have to get paid out, but the business is evaluated at 1.2 million. If I can get 250K in cash so that I can go to my little island and pay for my Wi-Fi, then I will float the rest of that money. And based on this business model, I'll take an earnout for the next 3 to 5 years. So there are very specific ways that we model that and can make it work. It requires more work, right? And there is the messiness of humans. So the more humans you have involved in something, the more hands-on you have to be in making the model work. And so that's why in my program, we spend up to a year doing the full conversion. So we're training the staff, we're working with the owner, we're looking at getting buy-in, and we're helping convert it both with a CPA and an attorney to put the bylaws in place. And then we're helping the workers understand what it means to be owners. So this isn't like a 2-week, I borrowed 500K from my brother-in-law and we're going to open up shop. This is a different model, right?
This is good.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, not that that's how conventional businesses get run, but that's how they get run all the time. So I hope that helps.
Let's be honest. Monica, what else we got?
Siggy, I'm hoping I'm understanding your question correctly. Are there any cooperatives along streets, unrelated businesses, only no association of businesses, it's proximity to each other?
So yes, if I understand the question correctly, yes, not necessarily in the Twin Cities yet. So if you look up worker owner cooperatives or cooperative hubs in both Baltimore and Denver, what you're going to see is a strategy called anchor strategies. So in Baltimore, for example, they worked with a hospital that was in a community that was economically depressed. So the hospital had a lot of money, but there wasn't a lot of capital available for folks in community. That hospital worked with philanthropy, created a fund, and they started developing cooperatives in that corridor. And so they began to create an anchor strategy where the hospital was in the middle and they provided capital for small businesses in that corridor to grow and thrive. So that's one of the models that we look at. And in our work, my organization, NEXUS, has only been doing worker owner cooperative strategies for 2.5 years. We are part of another sector of our business node called community wealth building. And the other place we're doing it, this is how my boss explains it. We're doing this. So here we have the North Star Cooperative, Black-led Cooperative Development Fund. And North Star is taking individual and groups of Black entrepreneurs, teaching them about their cooperative history if they don't know it, both formal and informal. And they're doing work to start these small grassroots cooperatives. We are helping do transition strategies with existing business owners. So as teams, we are creating an awareness and an understanding of cooperatives as an ecosystem here in the Twin Cities and the 7-county metro.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have more.
Yeah. Brian's back. He would like to know, so what are the tax opportunities and or challenges of organizing in this way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are some tax opportunities for the selling owner, depending on how the sale is packaged. That's why we work with a CPA when we're creating the modeling for how the business is going to be sold. That's one of the things we look at. What do we do to ensure the greatest tax benefit for the selling owner? For the business itself, one of the ways that the worker owners make money is through patronage. So patronage is after you pay all your bills, your net profit can be distributed in part through patronage to the owners, and the business does not pay tax on that patronage. So it is a way of managing your cash, and that includes the retained earnings. So it's a way of managing cash and sheltering it from taxation. That doesn't mean we're not paying federal and state taxes. We're above board here. But it does mean that you can be more intentional about the tax rate. And it is a way for people to sort of, for the owner that's selling, that earnout means You get paid a part, but you're not going to be taxed for the entire, let's say you sell the business for 1.5 million, you're not going to take that full hit up front. So we work with Wegner CPAs, we work with LATSA here in the Twin Cities. So there are CPAs that are very versed in co-op law, and we always include them when we're setting up the deal.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right, Monica, does it look like we've got any more comments or questions yet?
I think we do not at this time. If you have
All
something you'd like to ask.
Do you, actually, I was going to say, Monica, do you have something you'd like to ask?
If you were going to give a rousing endorsement of a business on Grand Avenue specifically to maybe think about this, what would you recommend?
I think there's an opportunity for the Grand Avenue Business Association. A lot of the owners are legacy businesses. There is probably a 40% churn. Like, I don't see me having a conversation with J. Crew about ownership, worker ownership. That being said, there are a lot of local businesses in that corridor, and I always think it's an opportunity to come to the business association, give them some examples of the modeling we do, and really talk with their local representatives about what it would mean to have cooperative businesses and get some of that money infused on Grand Avenue. I think this is an emergent story. I think it's a great story to tell. I think that this is something getting picked up nationally. And I think that having a worker owner corridor on Grand Avenue could be a story that could really impact generations in the community, and is a way to invite in more of the folks that live in Rondo, that live in the surrounding communities, and invite them in to reclaim some of that history of St. Paul and help the entire boat rise. So I really think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I would love to educate people more, because the best ideas start with conversations. And I really think that's the moment we're in.
That's awesome. Oh, I got shivers when you talk. I get shivers when you talk all the time. So something we do every show is honor our local nonprofit community. So since Christina works at NEXUS Community Partners, would you like to share more about your work there?
I would love to. Thank you so much. So NEXUS Community Partners used to actually be the Phelan Lake Community Organizing Group. And a few years ago, they revisioned themselves as NEXUS. And so we have partnerships. We have partnerships in Frogtown, the east side of St. Paul, and in Minneapolis. And so what we do is we focus specifically on creating multi-generational wealth in communities of color. When Black Visions Collective got a huge amount of money after the killing of George Floyd last year, NEXUS actually distributed $7 million of that fund directly into the hands of people of color in the community here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So we are on the ground, building relationships one-on-one. And our leader, Rapamaka, is one of the most exceptional human beings I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. I met him 8 years ago and said to myself, I'm going to work for that man. And sure enough, here I am. So NEXUS, I really encourage folks to check us out. There's tons of programming. We haven't even touched on Board and Commission Leadership Institute. We're doing a ton of good work out here in these streets, as the kids say. And I would love to invite more people in to learn about us.
That's awesome.
I did get a question.
Okay.
Where do we find the money to start one?
Oh. Yes, that's a fantastic question. So there's a couple of ways for startups, for worker owner cooperatives. There's a couple of different ways to do it. There are some community development funds for startups. What I would say is the first step is to get educated and think about what your business model is, because it's still about the money. It's just about whose pocket it goes into. So I would say happy to have a conversation. You can find me, Christina Nicholson, at NEXUS Community Partners in the Worker Owner Initiative, WOI for short. Or you can go online and look up worker ownership, the Democracy Institute. There's a number of ways that you can ping it and really start thinking about your business plan.
That's awesome. Monica, can you put in chat to the link to Nexus Community Partners, not only for the nonprofit outreach, but also to get a hold of Christina so that she can help?
I would love it. I'm here for it.
I did put a link to your website, and I'm just going to post your name here so they know where to look. And then I have a couple more questions come in. What are your recommendations for a Black entrepreneur that is striving to build a legacy in business?
That is a great question. So I think there's a couple of things I would suggest. One is, again, I'm going to be a broken record. Let's talk about your business plan. I think that there are specific funds right now that are dedicated to BIPOC community members looking to grow their business models. NEXUS is certainly one place, but again, Black Visions Collective, there's a number of organizations that are specifically focused on Black businesses right now. So I would say reach out to me. Let's talk about what you're looking at, what your business is, what your model is, and then let's get you connected in community.
Ooh.
Great. One more question. What can district councils do to help cooperatives locate in their neighborhoods?
Oh, go down to city council and burn it up. So I think in all seriousness, I think I have a deep love for Melvin Carter. I think Mayor Carter is exceptional, and I think he's visionary, and I think he has a very smart, young, dynamic team working with him and for the city of St. Paul. That being said, it is always the loudest bell that folks listen to, and the city council, like any other governing body, is up to its eyeballs. So it is really when business owners and community members come together around a shared vision that momentum then gets shared up and people start talking about it. So I think normalizing conversations around cooperatives, getting educated about what it means as a business model, reaching out to organizations, and NEXUS is located in St. Paul. We're right on University, to allow us the opportunity to talk about the math of cooperatives and why it makes sense. So as district councils, just get in the mayor's ear, and talk to economic development in St. Paul and really say, we want to know more about this strategy and we want you to be a part of the conversation.
That's awesome. We're in fact hosting Council Member Naker here on the 9th of June on our show, where we are primarily talking about business expansion and startups. So we will definitely bring that question to her about that. So thank you for the suggestion.
My pleasure. I'll send you your I Heart Co-ops t-shirt and I will get you. Feel free to wear
it. That's awesome. So we've got a little more time and we keep getting questions. There's a lot of energy around this issue. Looks like we've got one more, Monica.
Yep. Have you shared some projects that have failed?
Yeah. Let's see. Again, for folks joining a little bit later, we as an organization have only been around here in the Twin Cities as the worker owner initiative for about 2.5 years. So I can share, there's a number of member co-ops over the years that have failed, and that's sort of the space I come out of before doing worker owner cooperatives. The hub continues to thrive, but they have constricted to one location. So I think how would I say this? I think where the fall off is people get excited about working together. They come up with a business idea. They try to get money, or they've decided they don't like money, but they still want to do this thing, and they figure out they still have to have money. And then what does that look like? So I'll be honest when I say a lot of these conversations never go anywhere and never get off the ground. And so I think the difference is, and why we focused on succession planning, is because in order for it to be successful, you have to have a business model that works. And so that's really why we're talking about succession planning, because we're talking about sustaining and continuing a business as opposed to just starting a business from the ground up. Because most of us know 90% of all businesses fail in the first year. So just like the rest of the sector, this is not an easy lift.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow, we got one more.
What is the best thing you've learned so far from working at NEXUS?
Great question. Thank you, Cassie.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to answer this truthfully, which may or may not play out well in Facebook land. What I have learned working at NEXUS is the ways that white supremacy has impacted everyone, regardless of their background, ethnicity, how they present to the world. It is a damaging construct of individualism and exploitation that does not allow space for creativity or community ownership or any sense of history or any sense of legacy or any sense of connection. And so, as I challenge myself, being a white bodied person in the world, what I am learning more and more is to get out of my head, get into my heart, and know that there's a space where math and humanity can coexist. And at NEXUS, I really honestly see people working with everything they have to bring that vision to life. And I have to tell you that it is the joy of a lifetime to have my values and my work in alignment. And that is something I want for everyone, which is why I'm so passionate about this work.
Oh, again, you did it to me again. For folks who are watching, and if this is the first time you've heard that term, white supremacy culture, I'm actually going to put a link in chat later on so you can check it out if that's a surprising thing to you. If that kind of, I do a lot of trainings on this, and some folks are like, "What?" Mm-hmm. I'm going to put a link in chat. It's a fascinating area for us to learn about together and to consider. So thank you for going out on a limb there and putting that out on Facebook, Christina. Oh, wow, we have another question. This is so exciting.
Why should people who are not directly involved in a cooperative be excited about having cooperatives in their neighborhood?
Oh, great question too. Wow, you guys have some really smart folks. So a couple reasons that I'll go back to. One is that cooperatives put more money in local economies. So again, conventional business model. And don't get me wrong, I shop conventional stores. I got a Costco membership. This is not, radical proletariat land. It's only like proletariat suburb. So here's what I'll say. For cooperatives, the capital, the money that goes into the business flows back into the community. So that means folks are making a higher hourly wage. That means those folks are going to other businesses in the community and spending that money. That means they have the money to pay their rent or have the money to pay their mortgage. That means that they have an opportunity to get to know other businesses because now they are not just a worker, they are an owner. And so they have an owner mindset. It leads to more curiosity. It leads to more connectivity. And at a very basic and blunt level, it leads to more self-esteem. And I'm going to say this, stay with me. So when I started working at a co-op, I worked as a bagger, right? I just gotten my undergrad degree. My friend's like, well, why don't you work at this co-op? You can make money while you're looking for a real job. And my response was, yeah, because I went to college to be a bagger, right? Total snot. But what I found out once I started working in cooperatives is that there was no limit to how much I could learn, and there was no limit to how deep I could get engaged in the business. And so that taught me so much about my community and allowed me to think about myself and my capacity and my potential differently. And that's who you want to be your neighbor, someone with unlimited capacity.
Oh my gosh. When you were talking, Christina, I was reminded of I go to Grand Ave to get my hair done. And my hairstylist was talking about how she would love to go have lunch at all the places on Grand all the time, but she has to bring a picnic from home every day because that's, money-wise, she could never afford to, continually go on Grand for food. So when you talked about that, that's real.
It is. It's very real.
Money where they work. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's very real. And again, folks are making more money than they do at conventional jobs. And so it really does flow back into community. as opposed to a traditional shareholder model, which has its place. But what that means is the shareholder can live in Texas and the business can be in California, and all that money is flowing back to Texas. So it really does shift how the capital in the community works.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Christina, I think I'm gonna close this down. Where can people learn more about your work?
Well, there's a couple places. NEXUS Community Partners. If you go to NEXUS, C as in cat, P as in Paul.org, we are there under the Worker Ownership Initiative. You can put that in the search bar and you'll find us. And then, just as we say, GTS, Google that stuff. Stay for Facebook Live. GTS.
What are our search terms?
Right. Look up worker owner cooperatives. I come at this from both a mission-based perspective, but also a business-based perspective. And having a master's in business, I have learned that this makes not only good personal sense, it makes really good economic sense. And I don't want to lose track of that in this conversation. We all do better when we all do better. And this is a strategy that ensures we're all doing better.
Awesome. And what about that search term about the anchor cooperative that you were mentioning?
Sure. So if you do Baltimore worker owner anchor strategy, it will pop up. It'll talk about the hospital. And then there's also some stories on our website. So you can find some stories through our website. And I'm working with our media person to get some more of those narratives out there. And so I'll continue improving access on our website as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, everybody, we come to the end of our learning journey here at Summit Hills Community Thinkers. Please do share this show on Facebook and like our page to keep up with more content. Monica, send us out.
Well, you said June 9th we're having Councilman Rebecca Naker, but I have June 8th.
It's June 8th. Sorry.
Just to be clear, it is June 8th at 11 a.m. and we will focus on her efforts to assist small business openings and expansions. And we'll open up the discussion for more questions. So be there and throw your questions in chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Monica. Bye.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.